Hello again, and welcome to episode 2 of the Mod Pod. We hope you enjoyed episode 1, where we went over the philosophy of moderation, and we also hope that you haven't waited too long for episode 2. With me, as always, is my co-host, Kairi.
Yep, that's me. I'm Kairi, your humble co-host. Excited this week to talk about getting started in moderation. With us today, we have Eliza, or E-Cook. She mainly mods and community manages for Classy Katie. She's also an esports mod for DreamHack, Faceit, and the International. She does charity and speedrun modding for things like GDQ, or Games Done Quick, ESA, Players vs. Cancer, and a bunch of other charity and speedrun organizations. She likes learning and setting up chatbots for people and helping new streamers get started. And she's been doing small stream moderation since around 2015. So we're really happy to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me here today.
And our other guest today is DJ. DJ has been one of the lead moderators for the Discord moderator program on both the Reddit and Discord mod teams. He's been a part of the program since 2017, which is, I think, an eon in the moderation world. And he's worked on everything from Valorant to Borderlands to a couple of Square Enix's servers, and has really led, mentored, and helped grow the program as a whole. So welcome, DJ.
Hey guys, thanks for having me over.
Great, thanks DJ. We're glad to have you both here to talk to us today about how to get started in moderation. So all of us have been here doing this for quite some time, as we said. 2015 and 2017, like Talon said, that's eons in the moderation world, right? Let's get started on how we actually started in moderation, right? Let's talk about where we started personally and what helped us when we did.
Well, I actually began in 2010 with World of Warcraft communities, basically moderating and eventually leading small groups of 100 people until a few thousand people. Once that was done part of my life, I moved over to Arma Free. It's basically a military simulator. Older sort of audience, more mature people. I helped fill out one of their bigger moderation servers, and eventually that group went on to make a game called Identity, but I quickly pulled out of that thing. And then eventually in 2017, after a few years under my belt, I joined Discord testers, actually in 2016. And I basically helped a lot. I helped with bugs, helped all sorts of kind of little things. And apparently they needed people in the EU. So Dabbit, the owner back then, asked me if I wanted to moderate, and I said yes. And then slowly but surely, I worked my way up there. I joined Hype Squad as a moderator, eventually got into DMP, joined the Reddit, and slowly worked my way up to lead.
It's a long and illustrious history, and it's really, I mean, it probably makes sense, right? Given that it is Discord, that all of our beginnings sort of came from the gaming space and running or helping run communities, associated with one game or another. What about you, Eliza?
I got my start pretty much only on Twitch. I had a few small chat room stuff before that, but on Twitch it started. I was moderating for a friend of mine. Met them on Twitch, had been hanging out in the channel for a while, and as the channel grew, they needed people, and from there just branched out into more streams that I was doing because all the communities were like intertwined. They knew what kind of moderation work I did, so they had also invited me to join their team. And then at one point, I met the person I now community manage for, who's Classy Katie, and since then, it's opened up a lot more opportunities for me to moderate. Since she's like a smaller medium-sized channel, I was able to put it on like an application for a charity event that I did a few years ago. It was Project 168. It was like a week-long charity event for 2 different groups. It was like Extra Life and I think Special Effects. And from there, that was the main branching point. I was able to put that on different applications that cropped up. There's a Discord for people who moderate like partnered Twitch channels and such. And they post like moderation recruitment. I just started applying for them and I started getting accepted. And that's when I really realized how much I actually enjoyed moderating and like keeping communities safe and making it friendly and enjoyable for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So Actually, that's kind of interesting. I'm kind of curious to dig in a little bit deeper. You mentioned that you had just met this Twitch streamer sort of online, and you'd been hanging out. Like, was it an application that you went through, or was it more casual, where it was like, oh, you're like a valued member of the community. Do you want to try moderating for me? Like, how did that sort of happen?
The first ones and the smaller ones were very community based. They just kind of gave it out to their friends, people they could trust, people they knew who would guide the community in a way that they wanted it to be, like people they could trust the beliefs of. So it was just like a friend of mine just casually sort of giving the sword.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I noticed from both of you, like the common theme here seems to be starting small and sort of building your way up, which I think is something that makes sense in any line of work, really. But it's really interesting how, we feel like it's like, oh, I'm just involved in this community and I am really invested and care a lot about it. And suddenly you're in this position of power and you're like, I can really shape what this community is like. And that's a really awesome feeling, I think.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious actually whether the two of you, given your sort of experience modding, whether you've seen sort of situations where instead of, I guess, coming up the way that you two came up, which I think is mostly, you start small and then you get progressively larger, whether you've seen people come into any of the communities that you help moderate in where they just sort of got thrown into it. It was like one day they were not a moderator and then the next day they were moderating, a 10,000 or 100,000 person community. Have you seen that, and how have their experiences been different from yours?
I've seen that before in a few of the communities I'm in. Um, because now a lot of them aren't necessarily like the super small, close knit, like 10 to 15 people hanging out in chat. It's like 1, 2, 3, 400 people. We open applications and we don't really base it off of past experience. Yeah, past experience is a plus, but if we think your personality is going to mesh well with like the community, we don't really have like an elitist attitude like you should have started small, you shouldn't just be in here to moderate. It's more of this person wants to care for the community as much as you do, so it really doesn't make a difference where they started to me.
Cool. DJ?
I agree with what Eliza said. Whenever I have like a project going on, I try to like isolate a little bit. Like usually when we do applications, even before that, before we even speak about applications, I try to look around the server for individuals who I've seen going like the extra mile. Because I always feel that if you are trying to find good moderators, especially for a specific sort of community, you need to make sure that they're from the community and that they're, like I used to say, that they're not just people sitting in their ivory tower. If they have a connection with what they're doing, there's usually necessary enthusiasm. And aside from just being the moderator who has the power to hammer, I always feel that a moderator needs to be also versed into the community aspect of it, because to me moderating is both. So sometimes you have people who they understand already what's happening, they know the people there, they're easier to diffuse situations because they're one of them, they're not just that guy above them. So I feel like whether you're big or small, before you even try to become a moderator, at least in the projects I take care of, I honestly don't mind or care. I just want to see a passion to do it.
Yeah, I think that actually ties in pretty well immediately into sort of the next topic of discussion, which is, what the qualities that you look for in new mods are. And I think you've both touched on a number of them about sort of being willing or able or looking to help the community, of sort of already being obviously present in the server, and of it not just being about, slamming a ban hammer, but also growing the community. I guess beyond that, are there other qualities that you look for? And also, I think on the other side, actually, of the fence, what are some immediate turnoffs that you've seen in the applicants that you've selected or passed on?
The qualities, like I said, that I really do like is people showing initiative before it even matters. Like people that you can see naturally trying to diffuse situations, or someone joins the server, they don't immediately know what to do. They just like, hey, how you doing? Can I help you? Just help out. Of course, there's the thin line between helping the moderators and, as we call them, people that like pretend to be moderators. The name actually escapes me for a little bit. Mini modding, I think is the word. But there's a fine line between it, but people that like go the extra mile, like I said before knowing that there's even a chance to become moderator, I think those people are the most honest out of the bunch. But then, of course, you get into the parts where people are like, you can't do this, or I'm going to do this and that. It comes to a feeling sometimes, and of course, having done it a few times, you can easily pick those people out. They're like usually very pushy. They already start acting like they own the place, even though there's not really anything to own. And those sort of people who are like a bit too rough, or they're like creating the atmosphere of I'm better than you because I've been here longer. Those are the people I usually try not to go to for moderation, and those are my turnoffs, so to speak.
Yeah, adding on to what DJ said with initiative and just general helpfulness, I think being open-minded and looking for candidates who are open-minded is probably one of the strongest things that need to be done. Because as a moderator, the chat or the community isn't necessarily how you want to run it. There's going to be many times where you're going to want to argue about how something's run when if it's a community based off of like a streamer or a specific game or something like that, there's a specific way that they want things done or how things have to be done. And you have to be okay with that and not get hot-headed. You have to let things pass by that you may not want. And this isn't necessarily like a moral thing per se. It's more of you just can't do everything. You can't do everything your way. And it's definitely a hard thing to do. And that's something that pushes people away from modding too. If I notice someone is always arguing about the same thing in a chat, more than likely they're going to get marked off next time moderator applications are opening. Like I see that they're causing issues within the community for being hot-headed, not listening, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious there because both of you sort of mentioned like seeing them be a part of the community. I think that's a little bit easier if you have a smaller community, right? If chat doesn't scroll that fast, if like Twitch chat isn't sort of crazy, right? Or obviously on Reddit, I think you can look back through all of their post history. On Discord, you can see how they've sort of interacted with in the server. The sort of bigger the server is, or the faster the chat scrolls, I think a little bit of time it is harder to pick out specific people, right? You know, picking out a good person in a group of maybe 50 people, I think is relatively doable. Picking out 10 good people in a group of 50,000 people, I think is much harder. Is that something that you find as well?
Definitely. I've realized that the bigger your community goes, the more, I wouldn't want to say less hands-on, but it becomes way harder to like find individuals. At that point, it comes down to basically doing like applications on like for Google Docs or something like a form applications, and then it basically becomes a sort of selling idea, like not really like selling yourself, but it's like you need to write out questions and everything, and then unfortunately, at that point, you're kind of at the mercy of whatever people write, and that can be good or bad because sometimes the people that are not good writers but might be good moderators might get missed from that chance. So I feel when it becomes too big, it's probably like you'll have to go through applications, but at the same time, I don't think it's ever bad to keep looking around, like scouting, as they say. I feel like scouting can work at any layer or any size, but after a while, you can't really know everyone anymore. So.
Personally, I think when communities get to a certain size, it doesn't even have to be a certain size, really. I think moderator applications will play a huge role in that because it doesn't necessarily mean you have to select the application immediately. It shows the people who are interested in it. And at that point, you can then narrow down the list of people you're like keeping your eyes on for the good qualities, the bad qualities, the ones that you really have under the microscope for your mod team. And you can take time and evaluate that way after applications have been open a week, 2 weeks.
Right. It's almost like you have like a pre-vetted list, I guess, right? Where you're just like, oh, I really hope that this person applies because I think that they would be, pretty good. They've demonstrated that they can like act well under pressure and stuff like that. Broadly, right, like one of the things that we see a lot is that there's always this like push-pull between people that say, oh yes, moderator applications are open, and you just like, you send out a form to everyone and you just say, hey, if you want to apply, you can apply. One of the other methods of moderation recruitment that we've seen is actually for it to be referral only, right? So instead of having a generalized form, you just say, hey, current moderators, can each of you nominate, I don't know, like 3 people that you think could potentially be a good mod, and we'll work on that list only. Do you feel like that's better, worse, just as good?
I think that system I don't know how I feel about it, really, because it leaves the potential out for a bunch of other candidates that you might not have thought of. Or if you limit it, what if there's that one extra person that you could have written down that maybe it could have been everyone's could have written down, you know? And so you have a wide set of just individual people rather than like a grouping of one collective person that people really like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it feels like it turns it maybe a little bit too much into like a popularity contest almost.
Yeah, that, and it also doesn't tell you whether or not the person they want is interested in moderating, because not everyone's interested in being a moderator. Some people just like viewing, lurking, hanging out, chatting, that sort of thing.
I feel like what Eliza said, there's definitely a popularity contest that could be attached to it, but however, I've seen us do this, us being DMP in some sort of ways, and I feel there's a little bit of merit at some points to this system, because, and I'm speaking directly as a lead on this, but it gives me an idea, depending on who people choose, how well our members, and when I say our members, I mean like the current moderation team, is capable of figuring out candidates. Like, think of it as it's obviously my responsibility to make sure everything runs smoothly, but I like to know that the people under me are capable of seeing gems, like rough gems or like opportunities as well, just like we can do on ourselves as having like the experience of it, but it also gives me a moment to like see over my own team and be like, do you have good judgment skills about possible candidates? And at the same time, it makes me more comfortable if I know that they're good at picking people. Like, next time when something happens and I need you to pick someone for me and my team, I know that you have a decent head on top of your shoulders and you can see between good, bad, and etc.
Yeah, I think it almost ends up being this like interesting thing where, right, with a totally open, like a anyone can apply moderator system, I think you have this situation where, how does this saying go? You know, those who want power should probably not necessarily be the ones that are given power. And I think it does turn into a little bit almost of a selling thing, right? People, I think to DJ's earlier point, right, people who may be good moderators but are either afraid or unwilling or are just not experienced at selling themselves may get the short shift there. But I think that of course, on the other side, if you're sort of doing moderation applicants through referrals, you run into the popularity contest problem, and you run into the problem of like, oh, just because everyone knows this person does not necessarily mean that they're actually a great fit to be a moderator. And I think that you might say, oh, this person should be a moderator, and they're actually not interested at all, right? And I will say, I think that maybe there's sort of a compromise of sort of amalgamating the systems, and so maybe you start out with an open recruitment thing. And then part of it is that you have your current moderators, of course, go through and do a sweep. And they're like, oh, this person, participates a lot in the community. This person has resolved some conflicts before. This person is a little bit way too pushy and maybe not that. But yeah, I think we've seen sort of a number of different systems. And it's always interesting, I think, to see how new moderators are selected.
Yeah, for sure. You've mentioned a couple times that there's sometimes these people who they don't want to be moderators, right? And I'm sure you guys have heard the feedback. I could never be a moderator. I would just want to ban anyone, whatever. Somebody upsets me, I would just kick them. Like, how do you have so much patience? And while it's true that not everyone might have the same capacity to practice fair judgment, what advice do you have to new mods about how to keep a level head and act without bias? And on the other hand, do you encounter mods that are too timid to take action without checking with the team, and how do you suggest that they improve?
I think my biggest advice to the ones who are really struggling to keep a level head is take a break when you need to, talk it out with the other moderators. If you're having an issue with a specific person, there is a good chance the rest of the moderators might be having an issue with that person as well. But you have to keep open communication with the rest of the team in order to establish that, hey, maybe there is a problem here. But I definitely think stepping away and just taking a breather is probably the best way just to get your mind back in the game of where it should be. Because you really can't be rude or too mean to people in a community because you represent the title, company, whatever you're representing. You are a figurehead for them. And for mods that are too timid, I think it's okay for a certain degree. If they're new, they're going to be timid. I definitely encourage like new moderators to ask as many questions as they can. Like I try and emphasize that no question's a stupid question, because a lot of them are brand new moderators. Like I don't have an issue bringing people who have never moderated before as long as they're willing to learn. And it comes back to communication as well. If you think someone's being too timid, it's maybe a conversation you should have in DM with them. If you're someone who's either the community manager or lead mod, just like shoot them a DM, maybe discuss why they're feeling timid, what sort of situations maybe they're having a misunderstanding on what sort of offense, like whether something's just to be deleted, it's a timeout or a ban, whatever.
To your earlier point on taking a step back, I think that makes a lot of sense. One of the things that I'm kind of curious if you have any words of advice for is like, what are the times that you like, how should a moderator recognize that they're in too deep and that it is time to take a step back?
If you feel yourself saying anything at all that you even have the slightest tinge you're going to regret, honestly, even if you're at that point, you're probably too far and you should have stepped back already. If you're at the point where emotion is leading the conversation more than logic or rationality, you should take a step back if your emotion is leading it.
Definitely do.
DJ, thoughts?
Well, I can't really put him that much better than Eliza there. I completely agree with her in the aspect that second opinions is what I call them. Second opinions are your strongest trump card as a moderator. I tell the newest mods. Why? Because it's obvious they're new. They don't know everything about it. I don't expect anyone who got through the applications or anything to just know everything from the start. Not everyone is a natural, and even that is not always good enough. So I tell them, like, defer judgment to someone else if you're not feeling comfortable. If you think you're too biased, once again, ask other people, communicate with your colleagues. Sometimes someone else might have already figured something out that you might not have thought, a different point of view. It's actually even, like, some people will say, oh, I don't want to seem weak, or I want to see like I'm a bad moderator because I'm pushing this away from me. But I think it's actually a good show of self-knowledge and capabilities if you know where your own limits lie, and I actually come to terms with that. And obviously you can improve on them, but knowing when something can be done by someone else is sometimes even showing better moderation than tackling it yourself when you know you might do it subpar.
It is a trial by fire in some sense, right? Because I think both of you, of course, have dealt with brand new moderators who have never moderated before. And I think there's a certain point where it's like they're in training and it's like, okay, cool, they're training, they're reading, they're understanding the philosophy, they're understanding the processes, they're understanding the tools. And then, of course, there's a point where they have to sort of, fly out of the nest and spread their wings, and sometimes they fly and sometimes they plop to the ground. And I'm sure both of you have probably dealt with situations where these new moderators, in maybe their first or one of their first interactions with the community, maybe it doesn't go too well, and the community is like, who is this? What are they doing? And why are you terrible? How do you deal with a situation like that? Like, how do you reassure the moderator? How do you reassure the community? Like, how do you sort of like fix one of those bad first impressions?
Honestly, I've been lucky enough to not encounter one of the bad first impressions, because
wow,
in a lot of the communities, we don't take modding someone super light. A lot of the problems actually seem to arise after they've like been established in the mod community for a hot minute.
Uh-huh.
I don't know why it is, but none of the issues are ever first impressions. It's always something changes in the person, or I don't know what it is, but something just flicks and they become different, and everything just clashes with each other.
Maybe it's a matter of getting a little too comfortable.
It could be, yeah.
Or maybe burning out or something like that. Actually, hold on to that thought, because I think we'll address that in just a second. DJ, thoughts?
I've had a few situations here and there where something was said or done in a way it shouldn't have happened. Not necessarily like the whole server saying it, but when something like that happens, the first thing I try to do is isolate, in the sense of, I don't want to cover it up, don't get me wrong, but I want to figure out what happened, how big is the damage. If it's not too big, maybe if it's like individual damage, like they might have mispunished a person, I would always say have a chat with them. If necessary, I'll be the one representing them. This is in the worst case, of course, but like try to get it figured out between the two parties. If there's two parties, obviously, even the people, like if it's someone that you chose out of the community and you can see they're trying their best, sometimes the community is understanding of that, and they will not be as harsh on that person. But I feel like isolating it, trying to figure out what's wrong, and trying to fix it where possible, of course, is probably the best you can do. But at the same time, just being like, sorry, community, we have like a newbie here. Things happen, might not always be the best option either. But like Eliza, I've been lucky to say that I've never had like a big fallout happening, at least not in my projects. But I feel like sitting down with the affected parties and trying to talk things out, if it comes to that point, of course, seems like the best way to go about it. Obviously, you also need to reassure them out, because they did nothing wrong. Then obviously you need to tell them they didn't. If they did something, maybe have a chat with them, ask them if they understand what they did and why it was wrong. And if they do understand, I mean, you don't act like nothing happened, but you can see it as a lesson learned. But if you do notice that something is wrong there, or that it's completely like you notice that there's no fixing this, then perhaps it's necessary to see if it was a bad choice in the end, like the moderator or not, or if it's maybe best to like maybe a little bit more training and the like. But it really depends on case by case. Hard question, actually.
I think that speaks a lot to your guys' application and training processes that you've not run into this problem.
Oh, definitely. I've heard many stories about the Discord moderator group, how hard it is to get into there sometimes. So I think they also get vetted by vetted, not really vetted, but checked by Discord themselves. So it's like
we try.
We don't get the bad apples, and when we do, we have both practical and theoretical ways to like figure out if someone is got here in by pure luck or not. But yeah, I think our moderation recruitment is pretty strict, but not unfair. I mean, it might require a little bit more pushing in the sense of maybe a bit less strict at first and have a bigger pool. But at the same time, if the pool is too big, you won't really see the trees anymore if you only see the whole forest. I mean, I know I turned that around, but
no, it turns out it's a good metaphor either way. So actually, returning to Eliza, I think your really interesting comment and good point, and also something that we see a lot, right, is that people come into the community, they become moderators. You're like, wow, this person's good. They're making good judgments. They're keeping the peace. They're growing the community, and then something happens, or somewhere down the line it starts feeling like it's no longer a good fit, right? Or maybe it just starts feeling like maybe they're checked out, or maybe they're burnt out. And I think it's this interesting thing that for most of us, right, moderating is not a job, right? It is purely a thing that we enjoy doing. But I think it also has this tendency of being a hobby almost, right, that can certainly suck you in, and that can be something that you devote 20, 30, 40, maybe even more hours of a week of your life to. And so I think that the natural sort of cause of that is that it may result in things like burnout. It may result in having so much ownership and so much responsibility, and then feeling really frustrated when things don't go perfectly. And so I guess actually it'd just be great to hear a little bit more of those experiences that you've had, and how you dealt with those situations where you're like, wow, this moderator might have been great for I don't know, 6 months, a year, maybe even more than that, right? But something is definitely off, and maybe they're not representing either themselves or even the entire community well anymore. How did you deal with that, and how did you resolve that situation?
When it comes to situations where like a switch just flicks, I mean, it really depends on the severity of what happens. There's been a couple of times where moderation had to be immediately terminated because something, it just went completely off, and like they couldn't be trusted with the power to do things anymore because it was being abused in one way or another. And then there's been other times where people just completely disappear. And those are, I think, some of the hardest because a lot of the time they won't respond to messages either. So you have like the concern in the back of your head of, are they okay as well? So I think with burnout, I think the biggest thing to avoid burnout, and I've also been learning this recently, is establishing like friendship with the mod team, no matter what level you're in. If I'm like learning that if you are good friends, like close friends with the rest of the mod team, you're gonna see yourself being drawn back there. There's not gonna be something necessarily to burn out from because they're your friends. It's like you want to go hang out with them, and that it becomes another community within a community.
That's a really good and I think really interesting way of putting it, right? That I think that a lot of mod teams may not necessarily be that close, and maybe that's one of the things that results in it feeling maybe even almost a little bit more like a job, right? Where you're like, oh, this is my responsibility that I have to shoulder. But if you do have this sort of community within a community where you're like, oh, we're all enjoying the time that we spend together, we all care about each other's lives, then it feels like it's a little bit less of a burden and a little bit more of a maybe just a shared experience, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there could be an interesting flip side to that, though, where, these people are your friends and you might feel guilty not being around. Have you ever encountered that? For example, if you really need a brain break, like if you're like, okay, I need a mental health break, sometimes it can be like, oh, do I want to tell like the mod team, do I want to tell my friends that I'm not going to be around for a week? And sometimes it's easy to feel like a mental health break isn't a good reason. You're like, oh, I just like need to take a break, and people are like, why? It's just like, oh, I just need time. And have you ever encountered a situation where either you or like the rest of your mod team is like, that doesn't seem like a good reason, like why are you leaving? Or have you generally found that having your mod team be close friends, that they'll be more understanding of that?
I think the mod team being close friends really helps for people who need to take breaks because they can freely put. So a lot of the channels and discords that I'm in will have two separate channels. It'll be like an off topic, just like free chat about whatever you want mod area. And then it'll be like important mod stuff. Don't spam this chat. And the free off topic one, like it's like a family. You can put anything there and no one's going to judge you. Like if you need time off, people are going to offer to talk if you want to. And if not, then that's cool too. People are going to like check up on you and make sure you're okay. Like I don't think anyone in most of the channels are ever like super embarrassed or feel like it's not okay to put that kind of thing, or they at least have the level of friendship with at least one other person in the mod team where they can at least tell them that they need to take time off, so we're not all super concerned that they just like disappeared on us.
DJ, how do you feel about mental health, taking breaks, and burnout in DMP and the servers that you've moderated? And Reddit, for that matter.
Yes, Reddit. Well, for DMP, I would say we care. And when I say we, obviously the little structure we have 3 leads. Well, obviously you know, but not everyone. And we know it's a meme between the DMP, but we try to make sure, or try to like not necessarily force, but push people not to go too far, balancing your health and workload, because I love the enthusiasm by our moderators when they say, oh yeah, give me all the available hours, I'll be there at any time, and it shows people are really into it. However, I've noticed that when someone is overworked or like pushing themselves, that unfortunately those kind of things leak into moderation. And what I mean with that is, like, for example, something happens, and when you had a good night's sleep, or when you did not have a good night's sleep, the outcome of how you moderate a certain situation, let's say you're a bit more cranky, I guess, can be completely different than how you would normally handle it. These things can range from, like Eliza said, having a switch flip because something really bad happened, or something as minor as giving someone a very cranky answer. And I feel like you want to avoid those kind of moments where you think that you're no longer capable of, not necessarily clear thought, but where you feel like the way I'm moderating right now is not a real good representation of who I am or what we stand for as a community. So I feel like it's important to make sure that people are not overworked. And when it comes to Reddit, I'm a bit more hands-on with them. It's funny. We have a very good relationship actually. As you specifically know, it's like a dad with his children, sort of. It's a very weird meme.
I have heard people call you Daddy DJ, which is interesting.
That's cute.
Yeah, I think it comes from the fact that every so often, every few months, I try to send them a DM. I'm asking them if everything's okay, if they're feeling well within the team, if there's something that might not be okay. I'm not necessarily pushing them to tell me about personal stuff because I feel like I'm not meant to be the person who pushes into them, but I want to make sure that they're feeling happy, that they're not feeling like they don't belong or that something is wrong. I want to make sure that it's a safe place. That's probably the word I was looking for, a safe place, and that they are both proud of what they're doing and that they feel like they belong and matter. And I think because I try to check up on them, I have my little chats with them, I feel like that's why they started to make that meme upon me or that joke upon me. I tell them I don't like that name, and it's weird. I don't have any children yet, so it's kind of a bit weird, but I do understand and like the fact that they're pushing a term of endearment to me. Well, let's hope it's endearment. Let's put it like that. But like same thing. I want to make sure, same with DMP, that the people not working under me, that's like a wrong way to say it, but like the people I work with, that they're feeling comfortable and happy and that they know that they can approach me. I'm not that big scary guy sitting on the lead chair like, hey, you have to do my job for me. I want to make sure that if there's something wrong, they can come talk to me. And I think when you know that the person, quote unquote, who's sort of your boss, wants to listen to you on the same level as you, might help a little bit with not being as afraid to say, I have to take a break or I'm not feeling too well. And I think bridging the gap between, oh, I'm your superior, but I'm also your friend, and actually I'm just like you. I feel having that knowledge to your moderators is very important because, well, obviously mental health means everything. If someone breaks down or something bad happens, then that means it went too far, and we obviously do not want to drive our moderators in that sort of pit.
It's easy to feel like you're obligated to spend X amount of time, like, you can get used to a routine where you're spending a lot of hours on moderating a week, and it becomes like sort of I need to spend this much time, otherwise I'm letting people down. And I think it's important to remember that in most situations, you are a volunteer, and it is completely okay for you to take time for yourself. And even if it were a paid position, like if it's affecting your job, you should, take that in mind and, take time for yourself, because you wouldn't want to, be on the job in a situation where you can't do your job effectively. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Definitely. I feel, if I could chime in on that, I feel like if I ever have a moderator telling me they feel guilty because they have to take time off, I feel like I've failed sort of as a lead or a mentor to tell them that it's okay to prioritize yourself over moderating. Because the moment they feel guilty, it means that they feel they're doing something wrong. At that point, I feel like I've not done enough to show them that they are the most important thing, especially their well-being and their health. And it's not just all about business. It's not just all about moderating. It's also about the individual behind it, right? And that's I feel that cannot be understated. There is a job to be done, so to speak, but the job should not be going over your own health.
Yeah, it's really interesting because actually last night I was having a conversation with a lead moderator in a very large competitive FPS Discord server, and one of the things that they had actually mentioned was that because of the throughout the recruitment process, they would have moderators come in, and then maybe a month or two later they would go AFK, right? They would sort of drop off. They would drop off the face of the earth. They would sort of stop moderating. And it's interesting actually to hear a lot of what you're talking about. Sort of almost seems like the opposite, right? That everyone is super engaged, and in fact probably a little, almost sometimes probably too engaged, right? That they would rather moderate than perhaps pay attention to their schoolwork if they're in school or other stuff, right? And I think it really just speaks to, I think, a lot of the differences actually in the moderation community of, how you select mods, what you're selecting for, and depending on, the mods that you find and sort of the culture, I think, that they exhibit, you have different problems, right? Like that server has actually a retention problem where they're like, how can I get people to stay? And it sounds like the DMP maybe in some senses actually has a, hey, I need you to like take better care of yourself, stop investing so much in this.
So relating to what Sean was saying, how there are those moderators who will disappear after a couple of months, I definitely think communication across different platforms, whether it be if you're just a Twitch moderator, also having chats and whatnot within Discord, and vice versa, just having open communication across different platforms is probably the best bet, just to learn about each other and make it so you don't want to disappear. You're engaged in other ways, hopefully keeping your interest as well.
Yeah, for sure. And on the topic of other platforms, as we sort of end our conversation here with a final question, are there any noticeable differences to consider when you join a mod team, like as a new moderator? Because I know, DJ, you're on Reddit and Discord, and Eliza on Twitch and Discord. So when you join those mod teams, is there a difference in what teamwork looks like and what moderation itself looks like? I want to speak to that.
Luckily, a majority, if not all of the Twitch channels that I moderate for also have a Discord, whether it be a community Discord or just for moderation. The community ones, most of the time, they will also be a Discord moderator. And it's usually not necessarily like just going through the channels and making sure you don't have to have a super close eye on the channel all the time sort of thing. It's just like a crossover, so you don't just have a sword on Twitch. People can also identify that if there's a problem, they can come to you on Discord and they see where you are role-wise. And there's like differences between moderating on them as well. I feel like there's different tools for every platform that are like third party that will make the ease of use in moderation there.
On that, actually, I'm kind of curious because I think in my experience and most of the stuff that I've seen, certainly as it relates to, I think, some of the larger actually like subreddits that have Discords, they tend to have pretty different moderation teams, and I suspect DJ will maybe speak to that a little bit more on the difference. But I guess I'm kind of curious on the Twitch/Discord side, is there a lot of overlap where someone will maybe notice something bad in Twitch chat while a stream is going on and then ping you on Discord about a Twitch circumstance? Do you ever have crossover like that?
Oh, all the time. Almost all of our communications are crossover. There's no real good way to message each other on Twitch. The whisper system, like I get whispers 4 days after they've been sent to me. The easiest place is Discord to go and communicate. And then it also leaves a whole area where you can just see each other's messages and go back to it, quote, what message, that sort of thing.
And then actually, I guess my other question is there a lot of crossover in the community itself, or you're like, oh, this is this person that, talks a lot on stream all the time, and this is also who they are on Discord? And if so, my follow-up question is, do you ever have a circumstance where you're like, oh, I banned this person on Twitch or Discord, I also need to cross-ban? Like, I guess how closely, when you're moderating, especially I think for a content creator, how closely do you sort of couple those two communities together?
It definitely matters as to why they were banned. So like self-promo and that sort of thing, we're not going to go and ban them on Discord if it was in a Twitch chat, unless they're going and doing it on Discord as well. But like pretty much all other circumstances, they're more than likely going to be banned on both platforms. Just because if they were banned for something, the communities that I'm in are rather laid back in terms of moderation. If they were banned, they got banned for something bad. So, like, they don't need to be in the community anymore.
Right. If they're if they say something that is like hate speech on stream, you're not like, oh yeah, that's cool. You can just like keep existing on the Discord, right?
And that's almost like an immediate like cross ban that we do. If someone gets banned on a Twitch channel, a lot of the time we'll screenshot what happened. We'll put their Twitch name in like a Discord message in the chat, so it's easy, like searchable if anything comes up. And we'll also search if they're in the Discord at all. And if they are, we'll also get rid of them.
DJ, what's moderation like on Reddit versus on Discord?
I've had a little bit of time to think about this now because, well, the three main pointers you had was recruitment, moderation, and teamwork. Quickly go over them. Recruitment can be the same, can be similar. Why? I know for DMP and Discord, we both use a form. People fill in, you write a few questions, basically try to show us, what you're doing. We said before, credentials may help. However, I know that, especially for Reddit, we try to also go towards a side where we want to have new blood in there, as we say, like people that don't have, I'm a moderator from the Nintendo subreddit, or I'm one of the big guys from this and that. We try to go for rough diamonds, so to speak, so we can see like what's under the surface.
Yeah, I think that perspective of having new blood is super important. Like, you want to make sure that you have questions, not only asking like, oh, what moderation experience do you have, but how would you handle certain situations? Because judgment is something that you can't necessarily teach, whereas like, mod tools or, how you communicate within your team is definitely something that you can teach someone who is a prospective mod. And speaking of perspective mods, I do have one more question for you guys. I just want to ask if you have any general advice for people who are looking to be new moderators or who are new mods. What's something that you wish that you'd heard when you were starting off?
Probably just be yourself. You were moderated because you are who you are. Don't try and like change yourself too much because you were moderated. Just keep continuing to be you. Obviously follow mods who are higher up in the chain, like guidelines, but don't sacrifice yourself to be a moderator. And don't be afraid to unmod yourself if it's not a fit either.
Yeah, I agree with what she said. You were chosen because people that decided thought you were going to do a good job, so don't instantly doubt yourself. Look around you to what your colleagues do. If you're not sure, ask other people of your team. Ask questions, don't be afraid. And if you feel like it might be getting a little bit too much, take a small break. And remember, it's okay if you're not a natural at it, because not everyone is good immediately at diffusing situations or having amazing judgment skills. But putting in a little bit of effort and just going with the flow can make the most hidden gem turn into a bright star.
Yeah, it's all a learning experience, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that has come up time and time again, right, is what Eliza sort of brought up at the very beginning, but that communication piece is the most important. That the journey of becoming a moderator and of becoming a good moderator is not something, you're not, this isn't Athena sort of like fully springing out, fully formed from Zeus's head. I think it is very much a journey, right? And that no one sort of starts on day one with the sword or with mod powers and is like, yes, I know everything and I will make great decisions until the rest of the time. And I think a lot of it is, coming at it from a humble approach and coming at it with the knowledge that you have teammates and colleagues and friends, right, that are there to help you learn, that are there to help you grow, who have seen probably a lot of the stuff before and can give advice. But also, I think to keep in mind that, like, no system is perfect, and to raise your hand and be like, hey, I think that we could, for example, do this policy better, or maybe this process should be better, and that things get better sort of slowly, piece by piece, and that learning also happens sort of step by step.
Definitely. It's a walking, falling, and getting back up experience.
I think now we'll turn to some of the community questions that we've gotten over the past couple of weeks. As a reminder, we do have a open question channel in our Discord where you can ask our guests almost anything that you want, and we go through the questions every week before recording and select a number of them to ask our esteemed guests. So I think the first question, actually, that ties in pretty neatly with the last topic that we were talking about, is from 801234. If you have moderation experience on one platform and are moving towards another, what skills do you think are most transferable, and which skills do you think are most valuable to have on different platforms?
I think pretty much all skills as a moderator tie in to each other no matter where you moderate. A majority of it is just open communications with the rest of the team, being able to keep a level head and learning to adapt and problem solve in any situation that may arise. Pretty much expect the unexpected, because it probably will come up.
I can't put anything else in there because immediately said the same things that I was being communicative and interactive with your community, being flexible and adaptive, and of course being able to keep a level head. I mean, like she said, if it works in Twitch, if it works in Reddit, it will probably work for Discord as well, or anywhere else.
Yeah, I agree. I think the only thing that I would sort of add to that on my own 2 cents is that I divide moderation skills sort of pretty largely between hard skills and soft skills, right? Hard skills may be things like, oh, do you know how to configure auto mod, right, on Reddit? Or like, do you know how to use a specific bot on Discord? Or, do you, I guess, also know how to use auto mod or Nightbot or something like that on Twitch? I think the soft skills are the ones that we're sort of talking about. And it's like, it's judgment, it's communication, it's empathy, it's stuff like that. And it turns out that if you have those soft skills, I think actually switching between platforms is more a matter of just like picking up the small idiosyncrasies where you're like, oh, okay, this is how you use this bot, this is the syntax, this is whatever. But like the large sort of fundamentals you should already have, and it shouldn't be that much of a difference. I think maybe actually the largest difference, because Twitch and Discord are closer to, real-time communication, maybe the largest difference is just understanding the flow of each platform. But I think that in the long run, those differences are actually not that big.
Yeah, I think they all have different thresholds as far as, like, for example, spam. On Reddit, it's just like, oh, they're putting a lot of posts within like a day or something. That's like considered spam. In Twitch, it's like they're sending a lot of messages in, I don't know. It actually depends, because some Twitch communities welcome spam. So that's a whole thing in its own. But then in Discord, it's pretty obvious. It's like, oh, they're just posting garbage or saying the same thing over and over again. So yeah, just knowing the platform and knowing what's expected for sure. So the second question that we have is from BinchLord0998, and we've definitely talked a lot about this already. How large of a role do you think that talking to other moderators has in learning to moderate, and how can you go about finding mentors or moderation hubs that provide advice and information that may otherwise be hard to learn on your own? So we've definitely talked about talking to other moderators on your team itself, but they do mention moderation hubs. Do you guys have any experience with those, and how do you go about finding those, and how valuable do you find them?
And actually, just one more thing that I think this question sort of indirectly touches on is I'm kind of curious to get your thoughts on how much like learning should come from other people and how much of it should be based more maybe on what I call static resources, right? Like I think most moderation teams have a guide or have an intro or have, depending on how large you are, maybe like a 30 paragraph, 6-page thing on what their moderation policies are. How much do you think they should be learning sort of directly on a hands-on basis from other moderators, and how much do you think they should be relying on those resources?
I personally think the heaviest lean should be on the resources. Other mods are definitely a great resource, but you have to take what everybody else says with a grain of salt, because everyone else is also led by their own values and morals. So you can learn valuable stuff from them, but take it with a grain of salt, because everyone's going to think differently, and every community is going to be moderated differently as well. So you have to be willing to learn and readapt as you're moderated in different communities. And I don't really remember how I found the moderation hub that I'm a part of, which is Moderation Station. I just sort of rolled into it one day, and it's been an invaluable resource. Like, I have found so many channels, so many people, so many new resources I probably never would have even heard of if it had not been for these moderation hubs.
For me, I would like to touch on the thing of the mentor. I feel like it's very important. The role of the mentor, I feel like it's very important, because as a mentor, obviously we're speaking about good mentors. If you have a good mentor, they try to pass off their best qualities, knowledge and skills onto their mentees, of course, like what you should do in certain scenarios, situations, what you can do, what is best. I feel like they can be like the right push, if you have a good mentor, in making difference between having a good moderator and one of those shining stars that I was talking about earlier. However, like Eliza says, documents are also pretty important, but I feel like being entirely on the theoretical, you cannot cover everything, and I've noticed in some of our trading rounds, if we have someone who was entirely schooled by resources, that their chances of having adaptive qualities within an actual situation were small, because they were like but this wasn't covered in the documents. What do I do now? Unfortunately, obviously, you can't, like, it depends on the person. Some people can, like, adapt a resource into everything, but I feel like a good training should be both, like, documents and actual practical examples with a training grant, for example. I'm sure it exists everywhere, but I feel like the mentor plays a critical role in making sure and they understand that just the training documents are not everything. There's also situations that you cannot predict, but those is obviously where you're required to be adaptive or flexible, so to speak, right?
Absolutely.
And I unfortunately cannot speak about any hubs or anything because the biggest moderation hub I guess I have is DMP, and they give me plenty of projects, and I haven't had any real time to really look into joining other hubs of the sort because you guys keep me busy plenty, so...
So we've talked a lot about, the training documents and all of that. And so this ties into the next question from Lost1035. They ask, what would be the best way or system that engages training and or helping new moderators understand the basic core of how XYZ community is moderated, and how would that be approached? So we've talked a lot about documents. Is there any other sort of training that you do, and what does that look like that keeps your new moderators engaged?
In a perfect world, I think both actually curious like how you do it today, and in a perfect world, if you had all of the resources, how would you structure a training program?
I usually see documents and that sort of thing in the larger moderation communities, whether that be like esports or the charity or speedrunning events. I think a lot of the actual learning for new moderation is done by doing, other than the resources you've already been provided with. I don't know if I'd necessarily implement an entire training program at all if I had the resources. I think it's definitely important to learn how to moderate on your own. I mean, resources are definitely there for you, and they're more than just documents, the resources. They're programs, whether it be like Chatty, that's a really big one used on Twitch for moderation. It's learning how to use those as well. But other than that, you kind of just got to jump in there and get going, ask questions with what you have questions on, and just learn.
So hands-on more than anything else.
Yeah.
Totally agree there. That's what I had as well. Like, for me, it's documentation and the hands-on approach. Because providing the docs for the moderators, it's to learn from, obviously with some questioning, because your moderator can say, "Oh, I've read all of it," but they might not have. But to me, it's a good thing to get things started. Like you're starting things, but whether it's a training ground or just actual experience is where it comes. Like, to me, it's when the mod passes the theoretical part, it becomes a matter to me of pairing newer and older mods together. And I'm obviously speaking as a DMP project person, so I always have to like decide on people, but I try to pair newer and older mods together into communities so that they can get the actual experience to develop, because you don't get experience by just reading a book or anything. You need to do it. So especially the first project, I feel it's crucial because the new mods are usually obviously kept an eye on, and then you have the foundations that we gave them on a theoretical basis. They can be cemented with actual experience that they gain organically within the servers. But I feel like one cannot exist without the other. You don't just throw them in a server without giving them like the theoretical part, but you also should actually have the push to put them in the server after they've learned it on the paper, because otherwise you can never see how they will handle. And obviously it will be a little bit of falling, it might be a little bit of cranking the wrench here and there, but eventually I think both can create a amazing moderator, whether or not they had any natural skill at it or not.
Yeah, I think of it a little bit like, swimming or something like that, right? Like you can read all of the books in the world on form and technique and whatever, but until you get into the water, like you don't know how to swim, right? And I think once you get into the water, like you don't throw people directly into the deep end and you're like, well, I hope you live, right? It's like you try and ease them into it. You try and ease them with shallows, like maybe, right? Like they have floaters, maybe they have a partner with them. And that's the thing that allows them, I think, to get comfortable until eventually, right? Like, and maybe eventually is a weekend, maybe eventually is a month in, right? Like depending on sort of the length of the training process, but hopefully eventually they are able to swim by themselves in the deep end, and whatever, do 1,000 laps, win an Olympic medal.
Yeah, it's eventually it becomes like breathing. Like when you say swimming, if you jump in a pool right now, you probably know how to swim, and it's because you had that basis, and with the experience now, it becomes a natural thing to do. And I feel like you cultivated that by both the training, the theoretical, and the hands-on together.
Yeah, and I also think a lot of the newer moderators, like brand new to moderation, they're usually the ones who start out in the smaller communities, I feel like, for most of the time. So, or at least they're going to start out anyway. They're going to be hanging with the community for a while. They're probably going to know and notice what's getting nuked and what isn't and that sort of thing. And then the documents are for people who already pretty much know how to moderate and just need to know like specific guidelines on what that community needs.
All right. Cool. I think that reaches the end of the time that we have today. Eliza DJ, it was great to have you. Of course, I think we talked about, actually, frankly, a lot of things, both in selecting new moderators, finding moderators, how to make sure that they don't burn out, when to take a step back. And of course, I think the overwhelming thing, if you take one thing away from this, you should take away that communication is by far the most important thing. And so, yeah, with that, any last words from either of you? Eliza? Anything you want to plug?
Oh my God. I will plug my Twitter. My Twitter is at ELIZAKUC.
DJ?
I think I want to plug two different things here. I want to plug Dabbit Prime. He's someone who used to work at Discord. He's the reason I even got involved with Discord moderation. He used to own D-testers. He's an amazing guy. I guess I also want to plug my own Twitter. I mean, I'm not the biggest Twitter guy, but it's just twitter.com/DJScias, and that's, well, people write Sias wrong, but it's just SCIAS, or DJScias. And that's it. Just thank you for having me here.
Yeah, thanks for having me as well.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to have you both.
Absolutely. All right, and that is it. As always, I say as always, except I think we have broken that already. Hypothetically, we are recording on a 2-week cadence, but regardless of when the next episode goes up, you can find us at modcast.network, twitter.com/modcastpod, twitch.tv/modcast_podcast, and discord.gg/modpod. Good night and good luck.
The Modcast Podcast is staffed entirely by moderators across various platforms. Our hosts are myself, Kairi, and Sean. Panley directs. This episode was produced by Angel and edited by Brandon. Joe is our engineering lead. Social and design lead is Dan Humphreys. Our social media managers are Drew and Delight, and Ahmed and Ash helped write content for this episode.